agree that the northeast area of the city has the greater needs, and budget allocation should be made to address that need. Well, recently I spoke about a specific project that was put in the works, I would say about 10 years ago, and it was a housing project that was supposed to happen on Fernwood Avenue. And apparently, because of environmental issues, the project was halted. However, during that time, there was other advancements, economic development advancements in other areas of the city. And inclusive, just recently, they're going to do some more economic development around the public market. And that's understandable, because the public market is a place that we all use. And a lot of people, a lot of folks come from outside the city and they see what's happening there. But they also have to use Goodman, Portland, Joseph Avenue, Hudson Avenue, St. Paul. There's also corridors that they have to go through to come through our side of the city. And if you cross the other way, you have the Avenue D, you have Clifford, and you have Norton, and you have good old East Ridge Road. The bottom line is that not enough money is being allocated to do some of the work that we need to do in our areas. Now, I know that it takes a lot of legislation and it takes a lot of appropriations to be able to help an area that has been neglected for a long, long time. It's like anything. If a yard isn't cleaned up after 5 years, what do you have? Big mess. So things have to, little by little, have to be addressed. And in the Northeast, there's many areas, pockets, where they have done some economic development, but it's because other things have been happening. But when you walk in certain parts of our neighborhoods where houses have been knocked down, and I'll give you an example, the Remington Street Corridor. The Remington Street Corridor was the one that fed old Silver Stadium. For those who remember the baseball park that was back there, kids, families used to walk it all the time. Now what do you have? Still quite a few abandoned houses, and you have a lot of empty lots, with no plan in sight to develop this area to try to improve it. As a result, we're going to have a school, number 22, that's closing down. The deal is that we have to make sure that when monies are allocated to the city of Rochester, that we have a person or a voice that actually views what kind of monies we're receiving and how we can disseminate those dollars to actually help improve not only the quality of life of a lot of our residents, but also improve the infrastructure so that people feel and have pride in where they live and what is around them.
Thank you. So I take it as a yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, very good. All right. So how would that look like as far as if you were elected to the city council? How would that look like in your role as far as advocating for those types of funds?
As an elected official, we know that the folks who serve our communities many times are restricted in the decisions that they make. Many times, a lot of the decisions that are made within government have to be a consensus of agreement. Now, if there isn't a consensus of agreement, then that extra voice that, as I always say, is the squeaky wheel that gets the grease like it's happening in other areas of our city, if I were to be that voice, I would have the opportunity to actually look and pluck away at areas and say, why do we continue to follow the status quo because we decided to put money in a specific area because it looks good? Why not take a corridor? Why not work on, for example, your Pulaski Library that's been sitting there for years? Why not make that decision? Why not look at these projects and do something that's viable for the community that would help them and help us, or help me, because I am a resident, a longtime resident of the Northeast, and I've seen this change that's been going on. The bottom line is that in order to affect the status quo, the voice has to be strong. This is not about rubber stamping stuff. Every time we need to make a decision on specific major capital projects within our city of Rochester, usually we have a few who actually rubber stamp it. But when you have an interest in saying, I don't think that the money should be disseminated in that fashion, I think that we have a large constituency of people who have certain elements of their neighborhoods that need to be addressed, then that change has to happen by changing the minds and the thinking of those who are in government. And by me being part of that machine, then that gives me the opportunity to be that liaison, to be that catalyst, to try to change their thinking, to make sure that the Northeast is seen like for what it is. For lack of a better term, a neglected area that's been in need of a lot of economic development and social growth in education, also in public safety. It's been in need of that for a long, long time. We know it, but how do we address these issues? So one of my specific roles would be to systematically look at the issues and how they're disseminating help in different areas of our city to assure that our quadrant is receiving their due justice in order to address and maintain and also cultivate these problems that we've been having, trying to help to get rid of them and trying to improve that quality of life.
Okay, thank you. Next question. The current practice of recent years has been to grant significant tax breaks for at least the last 10 to 20 years to investors of downtown projects, largely favoring those renters of higher wealth and privilege. This is at a time when neighborhoods such as those in the Northeast have experienced increases in poverty and needs that include costly repairs. Would you support these decisions to grant large tax breaks for investors?
Well, if they were for our investors in the Northeast, absolutely. There's always the pull of power. There's always the pull of power, and power is money. The money will go where that power is. And if we bring enough power into the Northeast to change the thinking of folks, to make sure that the monies that come in are used accordingly, then we have that opportunity to make that change. Those tax breaks that they get downtown, for example, as the question alluded to today, means that they have the opportunity to take advantage of these so-called loopholes within taxes so that they can make a little extra money as they're constructing their buildings, getting subsidies, and also subsidies for the renters who come in, even though they're going to be high-paying rents. The thing is, if they're allowed or they can do this, why can't we not foster this type of environment within our community? Why can't we not foster that, as I mentioned earlier, a Fernwood? Why couldn't we find monies to give them the tax breaks that they need so that we are able to do the feasibility study on this terrain and be able to build the residential structure that we wanted to build? Same with businesses. A lot of businesses also get tax breaks, and depending on how close they are to a commercial district that's viable, they'll get their tax breaks. But try to put something on Joseph Avenue. And believe me, I lived that because I was part of a store that actually rose and then died. And then we brought it up again as another type of business and it died again. There were tax breaks, but not the same type of tax breaks that they were getting in other areas of the city because the owner, who was a predominant doctor, also complained about how he was trying to get monies from the county and monies from the city to be able to sustain the building and continue to move forward, especially when we were bringing in low-income folks as the employees to try to get some of those tax breaks, especially through employment, and it wasn't happening. But in other cases, in other areas of the city, where you had a predominant growth in some areas, you would see that those tax breaks would be there. But the only way that I would probably be in favor is if the Northeast get their due justice also with the tax breaks, that if anybody else has certain tax breaks that they get, we should have the same opportunity to get those tax breaks within the Northeast, no matter how impoverished we are. We have to educate, we have to grow, and we have to entice outside investors to come and invest in the Northeast and have them get the same tax breaks as they get in other areas of our city.
Okay, thank you. Just to kind of dovetail on that first question and your response, how would you redirect the priorities and the monies needed by residents currently living in these Northeast neighborhoods and communities? So in other words, you mentioned in your last response that investors downtown get certain tax breaks. How would you ensure we in the Northeast would get those types of tax breaks as well? Or if we're even qualified?
Yeah, before you answer, could you hold it, the mic not quite so close, it's making a reverberate.
Okay, very good. Will do. Is this better? Okay. I would advocate. One of the things that has happened over the years is that the word advocacy has been thrown out the window. We have to find a way to make sure that when our voice is speaking, it's heard loudly. This group right here that has been put together is to hold your elected officials accountable. And I noticed how some of the folks flinched when the group started to get together and organize. Some of the folks who are in office. Because it is to hold government officials accountable. And every citizen should hold us accountable. We are accountable. So we can't hide from some of the issues that we need to work with. So we have to advocate. The only way we could do it is by the power of the voice. I used to go to talk to city council. I remember, and the one who spoke is a great colleague of mine, Joan Roby Davison, when we worked at 14621 together. And one of the things that I went to advocate for was for dollars to repair homes. And unfortunately, there were quite a number of people who did not fit the qualifications because either they didn't have insurance on their homes, their mortgages were behind, they didn't have enough income coming in, a lot of them were too elderly to a certain extent, and all these things are like a discriminatory way to identify folks. But the bottom line is, I had to go before city council just to fight for simple dollars to fix simple emergency repairs. Because if I didn't do it the way I did it, and the people who were tapping me on the shoulder, the board of 14621 and other people, then they wouldn't have heard our concern, and another organization would have taken over all of those funds. The bottom line is that because the voices were heard, we were able to sustain and keep what we had and continue to disseminate it in the community, knowing that 14621 was the one that actually put together the plan on how to work this program. The deal is that we have to advocate, we have to continue to speak, we have to speak louder than loud, and I'll lower the microphone a little bit more, but we have to be very boisterous. And I'm going to continue to say, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and this is where we're at. Over the past 15, 20 years, this is all I've seen, that I've heard people with their concerns, and every time those concerns are brought to the proper authorities, it's kind of like they don't hear them, and we can take them as low down as low as dealing with our neighborhood service centers. We have to be louder. We have to make our point, and we have to try to make sure that they understand that we are a neighborhood who will not give up to try to improve that quality of life in these neighborhoods. So it's about the voice. It's about advocacy.
Okay, thank you. Would you commit to holding community-wide meetings every 2 months or so in the Northeast District to address residents' concerns?
Not only every 2 months. One of the things that I've learned over these last few months is that there is a Band-Aid approach for almost everything that happens. Some of the residents wake up one morning and they find a barrier put on their street. They find out that they have to go around the bend to be able to get out of their home or go to work the next morning. Then the reasoning they're given is that we did it because we're trying to curb the violence, curb the drug sales, curb any type of issues that are affecting the quality of life in your neighborhood. Were the residents really spoken to or asked of when these barriers were put in? This is an example that I give. A lot of Band-Aid approach. We have one person who has a domestic violence issue, and because it's an isolated incident, we just leave it at that. But the truth is, in my belief, is that we have to address it in a community sense, because a lot of the domestic violence issues that happen are happening in a lot of places in our neighborhoods. So what I am saying is that the only way that this information can come out is by talking to the people, is by communicating with them. And I'll be totally honest and upfront. I have a job that I work from 6 to 2, and I push carts. And my legs are like very rubbery by the end of the day around 3 o'clock. So I would have to plan my time accordingly. And some of you know that I also work at Frontier Field. I would probably have to put that to the side if I am elected your next council person. But the time for the residents will be made. Say it be quarterly, say it be every 2 months, say it be on the individual basis. But the time has to be made. And one of the things that I have told some of my cohorts as they have gotten into the political arena and they have created their careers is, you're going to change. And they say, what are you talking about? It says, your whole prowess of how you operate, you're going to change as a political person. And I keep praying to my God that that's not the case with me, because people are first. I talk to people all the time. The baseball league, the kids, the problems that they have, school, education, these are things that I hear on a daily basis, but I'm not going to turn them away. When they have a certain situation that says, okay, now I need something that you can give me in writing so that you can take responsibility for what you're saying, and I can take some responsibility and help you with it. And this is the type of action that I would take with the baseball league, but that's not necessarily what I would do with the community, because the community has a whole array of issues. We have all kinds of issues. But if we turn our backs and say, okay, so-and-so called, has a problem with kids hitting her fence. Then 2 days later, she calls the police, and so-and-so called and has a problem with kids hitting her fence. Third day, so-and-so, but wait a minute, now we have an issue here. Where are these kids coming from? What's going on here? What is the root cause of this problem? So if we just leave it at the issue that there's a person who's constantly complaining, and we just leave it at that because if the person's a constant complainer, we will never get to the root cause of the problem. So what am I saying? I have to hear. I have to talk. I have to get other people involved to try to resolve the issues. I had kids on the street. There was a program that was instilled in the city of Rochester to work with kids in the street. They came the first time. The second time I called them, they didn't show up. Follow through is very crucial. Consistency is very crucial. And I understand these things. I may not be the most consistent or the most prepared person in the world, but one thing I will tell you is that if the community comes forward with certain issues and problems that they may have, my responsibility is to listen to it and try to find some resolve. We're not going to resolve every single issue that may be confronted, but the truth is that if I make the time accordingly, the way that I'm supposed to as an elected official, and more importantly, a public servant, there should be no reason why I couldn't make the time to talk to different groups, to talk to different people, to talk to different individuals at any point in time.
Okay, thank you. Would you actively support and seek funding for the implementation of the innovative worker-owned cooperative small businesses in the Northeast? And what steps would you take to do so?
There are quite a few initiatives trying to deal with helping our folks get jobs, especially our younger generation. Any opportunity we get to do that, we should take advantage of it. However, the way that programs and government work, when somebody finds that they're stepping on somebody's toes, they close your doors. You can't get to certain folks to try to get the help and the relief that you need to be able to make something work. And I can give you that experience through the baseball league. When I wanted to start up this league, the first thing they told me was, you can't play baseball at those diamonds. And I go, why? You just can't play baseball. Give me a reason. Why? Because local authorities said I couldn't play baseball. I says, but those diamonds were made for kids to play ball. The point that I'm trying to make is we should work in all this, we should work together. So as far as getting help and funding for certain programs that can be viable, that can be something structural within our community, I should give it the full attention and try to find ways and means to connect with existing programs if that's the case, or to try to find philanthropists or other folks who may be involved in the same area and try to find monies to help cultivate these types of programs, especially when we're talking about education and employment. And if we look at our younger generation the same way as the older generation, when they look at my resume, they tell me I'm too qualified for something, and they won't give me a job. I had the question made to me 2 days ago. Why I'm pushing carts at Penfield, Home Depot. They go, why are you doing this? And I say, because I've sent my resume out there. People know what I've done. They go to my LinkedIn page. There's no covering the sky with our hands here. Everybody knows who I am. But why is it that nobody will call me for at least for an interview? Especially people that I've known over years. They look the age. They look at some of the things that I've done. They want to make sure that nobody steps on anybody's toes. And when these kind of things are present, it's present even when you're starting to do a program to help people who are unemployed. It's like the person who's been incarcerated for a long, long time. I was at pretrial diversion. I was doing volunteer work, working with the people at day reporting. And my whole point was to make sure that they had an opportunity to learn that there is a way out and there is an opportunity to get employment. But they've got to do their part and then have to seek out the organizations and the people who are on the outside that are willing to give them that hand and try to make it work. So the bottom line is we need to foster these types of programs, and we need to get funding to make sure that more people, especially in the Northeast, get employed.
So would you support cooperative businesses or in the Northeast or not?
The way that the Northeast right now, I am bound to have to support cooperative businesses in the Northeast. We need to find ways to bring in more economic development. We need to find more ways to find investment. We need to find ways to train our folks also to make sure that they're not left out of the mix. Yes, I would support that.
Okay, city residents often find it challenging to hold providers of goods and services in the Northeast, in the city, and in similar areas accountable for honoring their agreements, doing work in a timely manner, the quality of work, etc. Residents have reported incidents in which basic protections are lacking. The question would be, would you support the establishment of a local public consumer protection system to increase the accountability of those providing goods and services to those residents of the city?
Very loaded question. And again, there are organizations and agencies that deal with this. We have the Attorney General's office, when you're dissatisfied with some type of work, to contact them. And we also have the Better Business Bureau. The truth is that a lot of times we do not get the results that we expect. So we have to continue to work with them. If another agency was to be created, it would have to work in the conjunction with them because they are working with the existing laws and regulations that we have governing how we deal with these types of irregularities when folks have problems with goods and services. So the deal is we need to continue to work with those agencies. And if you want to create a separate organization to be able to work with that, we would have to see how would you say, the legislation that would be involved to be able to work with them and try to promote and create something that you can use just in the Northeast, if that would be the case.
Can you give us specifics on how that would look, that type of an agency, that oversight?
Well, basically it would look like something like what you're trying to do here with the Northeast and holding government officials accountable. You would look at it, you would weigh it, you would analyze it, you would see how effective they are, and bring out the reasons why, in your estimation and in your mind, they're not effective. And give them something to work with. So basically it would be an analytical point, a position where you would take that you would be able to check these areas and actually give someone some idea of some of the irregularities that exist and try to work it from there.
One more question on that. So what would it actually look like if you were to create a panel like that? Can you give us a little insight on that?
It would be difficult at this point because I wouldn't know all of the intricacies of what it is that we would have to look for to try to find the irregularities of goods and services that aren't provided the way they should be provided. So it would take some time to actually put a plan together to be able to address it. But it's not something that we cannot address. It would be something that I could not address. But as far as putting a panel together, we would have to first and foremost check and see how far we can go with the existing organizations that deal with these goods and services issues is at this point, and how we can work with them to make sure that we can meet and take care of some of these irregularities with some of our folks.
Thank you. Would you commit to the principle that the Neighborhood Service Centers, formerly the NET office, is to work with residents and neighborhoods regarding organizing them to achieve the goal of strengthening their efforts for decision-making and quality of life issues? And how would you hold these neighborhood service centers responsive and accountable?
Well, the community, the residents, are taking our responsibility to another level when we create our own block clubs, our own associations, our own organized groups to deal with certain issues of our community. The Neighborhood Service Center works with some of these groups. They try to communicate and work with them to the extent that some are satisfied and others are not. You're not going to satisfy everyone. What type of commitment would I make to assure that the Neighborhood Service Center would continue to foster and continue with these types of relationship building opportunities? It's already there. It's there, and the independence that a lot of our block club groups have given us the opportunity to be able to voice a lot of the issues that are happening in our communities. And what we need to do is to continue to create more groups in other areas of our neighborhoods to assure that the message is getting out not only to the Neighborhood Service Center, but to the government at large. As far as trying to tie that knot, that is up to the Neighborhood Service Center, because they actually, when we wrote the strategic plans for the Northeast, the Neighborhood Service Center was the one that was actually involved in trying to connect all those dots. Do we hold them accountable? Do we hold the Neighborhood Service Center accountable? Do we hold the personnel accountable? We have to deal with all of these issues, and we have to make sure that whatever block clubs and whatever groups are organized, they make that connection with the Neighborhood Service Center to try to use some of the existing programs and existing issues that they have to be able to help these block clubs grow and be able to be viable voices of groups within the community to advocate for the people.
Can you give us some examples of what mechanisms you would yourself put in place to ensure that the neighborhood service centers are following through on issues that are repeatedly being brought to their attention, but maybe not addressed or not addressed as timely as they should be.
This is where I get on my systematic soapbox. There are a lot of issues that are affecting many block clubs and many groups that are basically the same. Why are they not being addressed? Because there is not a systematic approach to them. Many groups talk about the loiterers, those who are hanging out on blocks, doing things that they shouldn't. And the mayor put it very well when she said, we can't legislate against morality, which is, she's right. And without trampling our constitutional rights, we can legislate against loitering, vagrancy, curfews. We can. So, what is it that we need to do? What is it that I, as an elected official, would need to do to try to close that gap? We really need to take that voice to another level. And again, I'm going to reiterate that the voice comes from the neighborhood. The voice comes from the people. In order to be able to be an effective voice, we have to take all those concerns and make sure that they're being heard. And try to work them in a way that those that are continuously there, we can address and trickle down the pipe as we go on in trying to resolve a lot of the issues, because there's quite a few of them that are happening in our neighborhoods.
Okay, last question. Would you support the requirement that all decisions regarding development or redevelopment in the Northeast would, from the onset, require the approval of the majority of residents? And if you could, describe the process that would assure residents are both informed and given enough time to arrive at an informed decision.
I'm going to start from the latter part of the question. There are processes in place that inform people of some of the changes, economic development changes, or streetscape, whatever the case may be, capital improvement projects. There are ways that the city informs the residents about these particular changes. They also talk about zoning issues. They talk about when new stores are going to open, and they also send out those cards, and you have to live within a certain footage from the establishment to be able to voice your opinion. But the truth is, if you know that some type of change is going to happen within your community, you should be receiving information from local government. You should be receiving that information and the appropriate information so that we can make savvy decisions as to why something should be done and why it shouldn't be done. So the mechanisms are in place. We the community, have to take advantage of when those cards or that information is giving out, that we move on it. Especially when you have the organized block clubs who know that there's something's going to happen within their specific geographical area or the streets that they represent. We should be quickly coming to the forefront and saying, we have an issue with this. And we got to try to make that change before it goes to vote to council. This is why you have to speak out to council, where you have the opportunity to go to them and voice your opinion. If you go in groups, and I've seen things overturned or tabled because the community has gone out and let city council know about some certain changes within their area of the neighborhood, or a creation of a business, or economic development, and even capital projects, like the time that they wanted to put a moratorium over there on Mount Hope because somebody else wanted to build a drive-through at a new Tim Hortons. Why? Knowing that there was a lot of economic development going on around there, and the U of R was growing, Strong was growing, they had more employees, and you ask yourself, why would they put a moratorium? The moratorium was put because there were some residents who lived behind where the establishment was built that they didn't want to drive through because it was bringing problems to them. And they had it on hold for a long, long time. Eventually they got the drive-through. What am I saying? We have to speak louder. When you know of these issues, you've got to let someone know. And in my case, if I'm your elected New York Northeast council member, I would be that person. And you have the opportunity to bring it before the whole council to make sure that your voices are heard. And it would be my job to advocate on your behalf.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, we're going to open the floor up for questions to Mr. Cotto. So we'll go ahead and do that now. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
Hi, Hector Vargas. You know that my pet project is here in the Northeast is the fact that, say about 2.5 years ago, I addressed City Council, I addressed our city officials and our community organizations to let them know that we have the highest number of level 3 sex offenders and pedophiles in our community. That we have pedophiles and sex offenders within 1,000 feet of our schools. The mayor, when she was in charge, she then created a committee. I was not allowed on the committee because I was too controversial, because I brought up the issue. Again, they asked me to prove it. After 2 years of research, my own research, I proved it. And I reached out to the school board and Mohan Vargas and whoever's all in charge. And I asked them, how do you let the parents know of the situation that's going on in our community? And they said, oh, all the schools alert the parents. I went to each individual school in our community, and time and again, they said no. They were done through the computer. We already know statistically, we are among the poorest in the city of Rochester. We have the highest crime rates. We have the highest HIV and AIDS cases. We have the highest of the worst in our community. And yet, our children are not being protected. Our schools are no longer alerting the parents. They say you can go on the website. The majority of our parents cannot afford the internet, do not have access to the internet. A lot of our parents are single parents. A lot of our parents, their first language is not English. What would you do to make sure, even I talked to the Wellness Center and everything else, and they recommended that we create a forum. What would you do to make sure that our children are stopped being sacrificed? And make sure that our parents know what's going on and who lives around us. And hold the police and Monroe County Parole and Probation and the Francis Center and the House of Mercy accountable for bringing these people into our community and putting our children at risk.
Well, first of all, we have to keep our community safe. You hit the nail on the head when you said that we have the highest rate of sex offenders that come into the Northeast. We know this information. We also know the crime statistics. We can see them on a daily basis. If you go today to the McGriff website, McGriff Crime Dog website, you're going to find that for the Northeast, all of these unfortunate shootings have happened. And you're going to see that the majority of the violent crimes have happened in the Northeast within the last 4 or 5 months. What I am saying is we have the tools to find this out. If the schools are saying that they're informing their children, then we would have to look at that to see and make sure that that information is getting out. We also would have to continue to be a loud voice to make sure that they don't continue to move more, unfortunately for the lack of better terminology, it's pedophiles and sex offenders into our communities. We have a system where some of our organizations are privy to that information. What they do with that information is beyond me. We know, and I had the opportunity and the experience to see some of that, and we know that the information exists. We just have to continue to push it forward and let the right people know so that they're aware that certain people are moving into the neighborhoods, number one, and number two, that if there are children close by, that we take a second step and maybe inform another one of the organizations, you have some kids living in this area. We have to continuously push the envelope, because as long as we do not increase the economic development growth of our Northeast, as long as our people are not taking pride in our neighborhoods, as long as our educational dropout is one of the lowest in the city, and not only there, but lowest in the state, as long as we're dealing with all of these other issues, they're continuing. I would say that the judicial system probably will continue to dump folks on us in the view that we can help them. Many of them are family members of many people, but that does not disregard the fact that we still have an individual who may be prone not only to hurt a child, but also to violence. So we have to keep a watchful eye. We have the tools to do that. We have the opportunity to put plans in place, each block club, each group, in a way that we can be effective. And then once those who are at power know what these different people are doing, they won't have no choice but to say, we've got to look at this with different eyes. Our kids are not safe. We have to make sure that we keep them safe. So we're letting you know, we know this information. How can we work together to try to alleviate the situation so in the future, the filter of these types of folks coming into our neighborhoods is a lot less. So it's a work that we all, to a certain extent, are accountable for, because these people, unfortunately, are family members and they're people who need direction. And a lot of times they fall right back into the same place they used to live when they were younger. So it's part of our responsibility to look at that, but at the same time, knowing the status, knowing the stats, knowing what's going on in our neighborhood, to let the appropriate people know so that plans could be made to try to avoid it or curb it for the future. I mean, I would probably be one of those people that you would call on when that happens.
Anyone else? Any other questions?
My name's Greg Charles, and I wanted to know what ideas do you have for increasing the beautification of the Northeast, and also the quality of life issues like loud noise coming from cars, litter, things like that.
And I'm going to go back. I'm going to answer the second part of it first. It all comes back to legislation. We know that 50 feet, if you hear 50 decibels, you can call it in, and they're supposed to do something about it. Okay, so if that's the law, what's impeding us from following that? So that's an area we need to look at. Can we do further legislation to further enforce or make it stiffer for the folks who are doing this? I don't see why we can't do that. And it goes back to what I said earlier. As long as we're not stepping on our own constitutional rights, we should have the ability to legislate for stiffer penalties for folks who are doing that. As far as the beautification goes, my plan would be to look at one specific area, and that's Brownsfield Opportunity Area grants. When we talk about Brownsfield, a lot of people have a misinterpretation of that because they immediately think it's about contaminated areas. But the truth of the matter is that Brownsfield is made as an economic development engine. Because once you look at an area, you do a feasibility study, you see what is there, you see what can be changed, you can get monies to clean it up and do something different and build something different. I had a Brownsfield Opportunity Area grant with 14621, and as soon as I left, unfortunately, it was taken and it was disseminated and it was used in other areas of the Northeast. But my thought was to bring either residents around northeast, around East Ridge Road and North Clinton Avenue, where the Family Dollar burned down, and develop that whole area so that we can attract people who work in RGH and in the city school district to come and live in these places to boost our economy. As far as the beautification piece, what we build is very important. And there's no better example of that than what they did on Mount Hope with the Riverfront project. That after they already had scaled it, they had drawn it up, the residents jumped on their bandwagon and said, you're not going to do this. And they had to make some changes to their plan. Why? Because what they were building was not suitable, or it didn't look good to the majority of the residents who lived in that area. So as far as beautification, that's one of the issues on a larger scale capital projects we need to look at, or I would need to look at as your council person. The other thing is individual streets, streetscape. I mentioned Remington Street. I mentioned Clinton Avenue, which they had this La Avenida project where they poured tons of dollars, and there was a specific project within that they halted, which is called La Maqueta project. For whatever reasons, if it was money or somebody didn't agree with the project. The bottom line is these are all projects that could have gone through, and they would have made our neighborhoods look a lot better, and people would have taken a lot more pride in them. And it's kind of like, you look at, there's on Clinton Avenue, Don Samuel Torres baseball park. We put grass in that a few years ago. People didn't want to play there because they felt unsafe. Go there today. People want to play there. We have to beautify what we have. Parks and recreation, to me, also is close to my heart. One of the things that we have is that many of our fields, many of our park systems that are outside, not inside the buildings, but outside, they need to be revamped. They need to be fixed so that when people go there, they feel good, that they take pride in their neighborhood. And that's about beautifying them. It's about making them look good, putting up the right words, the right murals, that kind of stuff, to make sure that people feel good when they walk around in their neighborhoods. And obviously the little small pocket gardens and parks with the nice flowers, and we have to continue to do that so that people see that, and it actually motivates them to feel good while they're walking in their neighborhoods.
Just to kind of follow up on Craig's question, so if you're elected to city council, how would you rally or spearhead efforts that have been long-time complaints of our area on litter, noise, beautification? Specifically, what would you do as a city council member? How would you push that effort through?
I think the main thing that I would need to do is to keep it on my desk. Keep it as priority. Keep it at a point that every time that I strike up a conversation with a different elected official from another area of the city, that I hear the same things. I say, okay, so what is it that we're doing in your area to improve, and it's getting better? Why can't we do it in our area? And I'll give you an example. Plowing streets. Some of our sidewalks do not get plowed when the snow comes down. You go down to other parts of the city and they get plowed. Why does that happen? As your voice and as your council person, now I have an opportunity to say, what are we doing here? Why is it that certain areas aren't getting plowed? Because it is the Northeast. When a call gets put in, the Rochester Police Department has their job. But a call gets put in for Oscar Street, and they don't show up. A call gets put in for Wilkins Street. They don't show up. And I was just recently told a call gets put in for Scranton Street, and they show up. What is the difference? A call gets put in for Park Avenue. They're there. What is the difference? The difference would be to make sure that I would be that advocate and talk to the other council people who represent their districts, and talk to the council people at large to make sure that we're all on the same page. Because I believe that there will be a shift of power. If I get on city council, things will be different. Things will definitely be different.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Bonnie? Thank you, Mr. Cotto. Appreciate it.
We're almost finished for the night. I'd like to remind everyone that candidate nights for the Rochester School Board will be held on September 8th at 485 North Clinton Avenue at the same time. We hope that you're going to be able to attend. And we're going to be closing up now, so I will let Bonnie or Laura speak. Thank you very much for attending.
Yeah, I just want to make say a few words. As you can see, the people who are running for office from for the county 29th district are not here. One person, Ernest Flagler, had a death in his family. The other person, Leslie Rivera, there was a lot of difficulty in actually reaching her, and she is also involved in the work on the refurbing of the East High School program, so she's involved in that and has another event tonight. What we want to do is, because we realize we need to wrap up here some, is ask you, I think you all saw the questions that we were going to ask for the county people, and so maybe we can just ask you if there's anything on this list of questions that you would like to clarify, or you have an interest in, you'd like to speak to something yourself, that would be fine. We could take a few minutes to do that. And so let me just ask that now. Is there any one who would like to say anything about any of these points on the questions for the county candidate? We can pause for a minute while you look at the list. Okay, I'm sure the two people who aren't here would welcome, any contact from any of you who would like to talk with them directly. The one thing I would point out here, the first question on here involves the fact that there's a big effort across the county to push for more child care monies and preschool programs funding. So this is a problem, serious problem, with lack of funds. That they were reduced again this year. So a lot of folks have gotten together across the city and really want to push this for a high priority. So you may be seeing some more literature in the city talking about this problem. And we would like to urge people to support these efforts as we are trying to do, because it's extremely important. We can't have a quality citizenry if we don't start providing quality from early on in life. So this is very, very important, and I wanted just to point that out, that it's not just our group that's doing that. Okay, we're all set? Okay, thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it. I'm terrible with this stuff.